Hi, so we are student-led discussion group number 6, and we will be talking about the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. I am Mia.
Hi, I'm Kennedy.
I'm Andrea.
Hi, I'm Paola.
So our topics today are going to be transnational and U.S. borderlands. The questions that we aim to answer for our presentation are as follows. The history of the U.S. and Mexico borderlands. How has the border that we know today formed? La Frontera. How has the culture shaped the borderlands? Um, how borderlands became a place of crime and violence? What geopolitical aspects affected the borderlands in such a way that caused an increase in violent crime, family separation and deportation centers. How are the borderlands being used by ICE and Border Patrol agents to separate families and hold immigrants in inhumane detention centers? And the role of undocumented labor in the U.S. economy. What role has the U.S. played in destabilizing the Mexican economy, which has caused Central and South Americans to come to the U.S. in hopes of work, and class of nations and social justice? How have we amended or worsened these transnational relationships? And has there been any justice for those affected by these conflicts? To begin with, we'll start with just addressing what transnational issues are and how they affect the US and Mexico. Transnational issues refer to issues that transcend borders and require international cooperation between neighboring countries in order to come to mutual understandings. Some transnational issues faced currently between US and Mexico are drug and weapon trafficking, immigration, water rights, etc. Let's start with the history of the Mexico and US borderlands. The US Mexico border that we know today, running from the coast of California to Texas, has not always looked the same. And the history behind it, unfortunately, is much darker than you may think. Originally, Border Patrol agents were actually just slave catchers who patrolled the borders in hopes of catching enslaved individuals as they attempted to flee to Mexico and Central South America in hopes of freedom. These slave catchers would be rewarded with like cash earnings if they returned the escaped slaves to their quote unquote owners. Mm, Okay, and then how has the border evolved since the addition of Texas into the Union? Initially, Texas, what we know as Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico was not a part of the US. Initially, they had their eyes on Texas, um, and then gold was discovered in California, and the US also wanted that. So, in order to obtain the land, US troops invaded and occupied parts of Mexico that we now know as California, Arizona, New Mexico, in order to siege property. This then commenced the Mexican American War of 1846. Um, After the war, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed February 2nd, excuse me, of 1848. This reestablished the border of Mexico and US as the Rio Grande, which pretty much since 1848, not much has changed geographically about the border. It is just important, I feel, that we remember the ways in which the border came to be today, just because, especially living in South California, we are in its confines and directly affected by that.
Next, we're going to talk about how do borderlands cultivate a unique culture between the two nations. And start, La Frontera refers to the borderlands. It is a term used to refer to the liminal spaces between the border. These places are unique and they cultivate their own special culture because of their location and the differing populations. They also face individual issues that might be hard for someone not from living in these areas to understand. And then these issues are immigration, border security, economic disparities, and identity issues.
And then next, we will be talking about deportation slash holding centers. So, deportation holding centers were originally created in the late 1880s. The U.S. government is responsible for ensuring the facilities fall under federal standards. Investigators have been flagging facilities recently for being overcrowded and having prolonged detentions, mentioning immediate risk to health and safety, as well as poor conditions and violations. Inhumane conditions and refusal of rights, such as medical neglect, solitary confinement for long periods of time, preventable deaths, as well as discriminatory and racist treatment. And a lot of these holding centers are operated for profit by private companies, as well as family separation. Deportation on one individual truly affects the entire family in a variety of ways, some causing long-lasting damage. An individual or caregiver of a family being separated can place a heavy load on only one caregiver, having to balance work, childcare, home activities, as well as expenses. Deportation of both parents can cause a child to go into holding facilities or under government care, usually causing trauma, which can include mental health issues, disruption of education, turbulent environments, and experiencing violence and abuse, overall affecting communities, not only one family.
Moving on, we will talk about the free trade agreement. This is referring to the North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA, which was replaced more recently by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, also known as the USMCA, which took effect July 1st of 2020. This agreement seeks to modernize trade, enhance rules of origins of specific goods, such as automobiles, and update the trade in food and agriculture and reinforce intellectual property rights. By creating a more equal trading environment, the USMCA aims to assist North American businesses, farmers, ranchers, and laborers. However, while it can be good for some countries, it might have negative effects for others. And in this case, it did negatively affect Mexico's economy. Unfortunately, it reduced trade volume, increased security concerns, and disrupted supply chains, which in this case just kind of decreased foreign investments to Mexico, and companies based out of Mexico. This directly and negatively affect Mexico's economy by pushing labor from Mexico into America and Canada, which then causes Mexican and other Central South American individuals to migrate to America in order to hopefully obtain jobs. Um, Unfortunately, and we can move to the next slide. Sorry.
Okay, the role of undocumented labor in the economy. The United States' role in destabilizing the Mexican economy had many factors that included trade imbalances, political intervention, and financial crisis. In the 1800s, Mexico and the U.S. were at war, which resulted in the U.S. taking nearly half of Mexico's land. This hurt their economy and weakened the country because land for farming and trade were lost. This is mainly referring to Texas and California. In 1994, the US, Mexico, and Canada signed a trade deal, which is known as NAFTA, that allowed goods to move freely throughout the three countries. An influx of cheap US products were landing in Mexico, resulting in Mexican farmers losing their jobs because they could not compete with US products. Factory jobs were created in Mexico but were low wage with poor working conditions. Many factories moved to the U.S., causing people to lose their jobs or forcing them to migrate to the U.S. for employment. Additionally, although the U.S. severely destabilized Mexico's economy, the role of undocumented labor here is incredibly essential. Jobs like farming, construction, cleaning, food processing, and other labor are mainly worked by undocumented immigrants, and these are jobs that U.S. citizens do not want. Undocumented workers pay taxes but cannot collect benefits like Social Security or Medicare, and because of that, it adds to the economy. Due to poor decision making on the US's end, it affected other countries like Mexico, along with Central and South America. Situations like drug wars, bad political agreements, and unfair economic decisions resulted in job loss, violence, and poverty within those countries. Many people from Mexico, Central, and South America began to migrate to the US to find work and safety, which is where we hear the term for a better life. The US takes a very unfair advantage of undocumented labor as it is high reward for the economy but low cost to them.
Speaking on drug wars and violence, how the borderlands became a place of crime and violence, we can say that because of an intricate structure of overlapping variables such as their remote location, lack of facilities, and the presence of non-state outside forces such as drug cartels and rebel groups, borderlands have become areas for crime and violence, creating a low risk, high opportunity environment for criminal activity. And the US's high demand for drugs fuels the illegal drug trade across the border.
And then last but not least, this is our activity. We did a simple word search related to some of the words and topics we had within our presentation. Thank you so much. This is the end. And please leave any comments at the bottom.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.